Hello and welcome to a very special end-of-year edition of the Sustainable Commodities Podcast, the podcast to help people navigate the ever-changing world of sustainability and sustainable commodities. I'm Barnaby Patchett, MD of 199, a comms agency working in sustainability, and with me as always...
Judith Murdoch from Murdoch Associates.
Right, in this episode we're going to do a kind of rundown of what's happened over the last year. We're going to look at some of the previous episodes and some of the things that we discussed there. We're going to talk about the general state of sustainable commodities, you know, the positives and negatives from the last year. And then we might touch a little bit on a very popular topic on the podcast, which is EUDR. I don't know if that was a sigh or a cheer there, Judith. But before we do, I think we'll just start by telling you a little bit about what we've been up to the last few months. So, Judith, in November, you were over to Malaysia.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, a fantastic 2-week trip in Malaysia. I must admit, I was looking forward to it, but I kind of had that, we'll see how we get on. But it was really, really good. And it centered around three things. One was the RSPO RT. And then I spent 3 days working with the RSPO on the supply chain certification standard review, which is a very interesting and intense 3 days. And then I went on the Malaysian Council Palm Oil tour, which was really good. And so, I mean, I think just to talk a little bit about the RT. You know, the usual faces were there. But I think, you know, they were very, you know, a lot of people thinking about the increase in volumes and how they're going to get to the 2050 targets of I think it's about 150 million tons of palm oil, and thinking about seeds and planting and smallholders and Africa and so on. And then obviously the subject of EUDR.
Yeah.
And the shrinking market, I think, of Europe was a big subject. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, isn't it? I mean, the EUDR has obviously framed the debate over here for the last several years. But in terms of themes, we're starting to see a lot of the themes from the wider sustainability movement space become really centered on in the palm space as well. Regenerative agriculture, the plight of smallholders, the finances. You know, they're all kind of coming to a head. It does say a lot, I think, about where we're at. I haven't been away anywhere exciting, so I haven't been away. I had I've got a baby, so a lot of my time has been spent awake rocking. But also working on a lot of sustainable commodities comms, a lot around EUDR still. I mean, it's the gift that keeps giving from a sort of work perspective, but from a from an impact perspective, I think we'll discuss that a bit later on. I see a lot more in regenerative agriculture coming along the line. We're doing a lot in MRV. You know, you can see the kind of the themes of the space are kind of filtering down to the communications as well.
No, well, I think the big one for me, particularly again with the conference, but also when I went on the Malaysian Palm Oil Council tour, went to particular plantations, Felda, and went. So this Peninsula Malaysia, and went and saw a lot of smallholders. And what struck me there is the big subject on smallholders. So smallholders, you know, we think of them as always been in poverty and, you know, potentially not got access to internet, to healthcare, etc. And that is very true still in a lot of places. But what was interesting in Malaysia is that you started to see the history, and you were seeing plantations that had been there for 50 years. So, you know, it was already onto this, right, well, we'll be taking these trees down because this will go into a third generation plantation. But what was interesting was the smallholders who were given land. They're described as settlers and were given land in the 1950s. And what was great was that a lot of it. We saw a lot of the best of the best. But what was great was a lot of the people that were presenting and managers and so on were all, people who've been to university and had fantastic education and have come back to work in plantations. I think the big takeaway for me, the point being, is the importance of smallholders, but the complete reliance on migrant labour. There was there was no Malaysians working where we were. Bangladesh, Nepal, places like that, and particularly once one comes and they find good work, good accommodation and reasonable pay, then they tend to bring others from their countries. So yeah, there was quite a lot of people from Nepal and Indonesia still, people still coming from Indonesia as well, but no Malay actually working in the plantations.
So that's, I guess that's, it's neither a positive nor a negative, really. It's a story of development. I guess for Malaysia, you would think of it as a positive. This is people who have used palm oil cultivation and smallholding to better themselves and to move up out of that space, really. I guess that at some point you run out of people to bring in terms of, and you run out, that isn't a model that can continue ad infinitum.
No. And then that was again interesting, going to some plantations, in particular SD Guthrie, who I know we've got lined up hopefully for the new year. So was showing about using drones and potentially being able to send drones around to see when the fruit was ripe, because again gives you the fruit quality. And we're even talking about, could it ever go to be that you've got pickers who can, so obviously drones, robots that could ever do something like that. And that in one respect was, you could see that, but also quite frightening, really, that all of a sudden we're going to have these plantations that are void of people, that are just, machines that are picking fruit. I don't know, is that 20 years from now? You've got to say how fast things are moving. Maybe that is the future, but it was certainly something that was discussed, and again quite proud and saying, we're serious about this technology. Was quite interesting.
But that, the automation and AI, I don't think anyone's safe from that in terms of, brings up some much wider things that I don't think we're going to get into here in terms of employment and opportunities, because every one of those drones that can pick is someone who isn't picking. And what do they do, and how do we ensure that they can survive and they can be looked after? I mean, it's happening. We're not insulated from it in the kind of information space with the arrival of AI, but the automation side, when automation and AI come together, the impact on industries is going to be, well, we don't know yet. We just can't predict it, can we?
No, we can't. And I guess also then the other side of it was actually going to visit Wild Asia project on the ground in Malaysia, which was looking at regenerative agriculture, basically, and how supporting smallholders to do some really unique things and improve the land. That was kind of special as well. So you go from this whole big discussion about automation and huge plantations to smallholder, which I do have to say, I turned to a colleague who was there and said, "Oh, look at all the insects, look at all the butterflies," and she replied straight back, "Listen to the birds," and it was like, actually, there's quite a lot of birds on here. So I think again, it's just this trying to, regenerative agriculture or looking after the land, how. And then the other bit that was really special, I should just say this, we went to a tiger sanctuary that is not open to the public, where they were bringing in wild tigers that were causing issues, which I hadn't thought about. I mean, I'm big into orangutans and thinking about that, but there still are 150 tigers that are left, and they're actually got a breeding program and trying to see if they can release them back. But what was quite nerve-wracking was one of them we had in the breeding centre. We were only allowed to see 4 because you couldn't get anywhere near the other ones. They didn't want any human contact.
Yeah.
So man killer. It had killed somebody and they'd captured it and brought it in for a breeding program. But that was sort of like, oh my God. But wonderful, because I mean, if it had been in Europe, they would have shot it, you know? So
Yeah.
it was quite, and the elephants and that the nature side really hit me this time in Malaysia. It isn't just face of the orangutan, it's the wild elephants, it's the tigers, it's the insect and butterflies and so on. So, and that was all on the Malaysian Palm Oil Council tour. And again, we might try and get somebody to come and talk about MSPO and what the Malaysians are doing. But it was interesting to see their commitment and advancement, and again trying to support programs like, say, Wild Asia, which was great.
Yeah, I think the regenerative agriculture does feel like one of the big themes that we're going to be talking about over the next year, and biodiversity. Not only are people recognizing its value more and more, but its ability to feed into all of the other aspects that we're trying to solve. You know, to feed into things like the carbon footprint and everything else. It does feel like if we sort the soil out and
Yeah,
and provide kind of that, start those foundations for biodiversity, then obviously it's a food chain. Everything else benefits.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
No, definitely,
yeah.
definitely.
Um, right. So moving on to the podcast itself, we've done a lot of episodes this year, it feels like.
Yeah,
We've
a
covered quite
lot.
a lot of different ground as well. I think if year one, when we set out, we were thinking it's going to be mainly about EUDR. I mean, at this rate, next year could be mainly about EUDR again. But I think this year we managed to branch out a bit. You know, we've covered nuts and beef and regenerative agriculture and certification standards and all sorts of other bits and pieces. What was your favorite episode of the year?
Yeah, it's quite a difficult one because you obviously primed me before and asked me that you were going to ask me this question, and I was thinking, actually, it's really perhaps really hard, because I think what I've really enjoyed is I've enjoyed the journey myself. I mean, it's just we did this for fun. You know, we've come
Mm,
together to do a podcast for a bit of fun, and I think it's been great listening to people and learning from a whole array of people that I've never met, but also people that I know well. So I think Rainforest Alliance, the episode we did with them, I thought was really interesting. And, you know, certification group and charity that's been going for a long time, and their journey, I found that really inspirational. And I guess people like Tice Passman, who is somebody that I've known a long time, talking a lot about his personal experiences in places like Indonesia, and then we were also talking about Neil Judd of Pro Forest, again somebody I've known years. But also it's this whole coming together and sharing ideas in a space where it's just good to talk and get different angles, when sometimes in the media you're just getting fed the same message, and it's just nice getting just a different take on it all. So those are perhaps the ones that stick out for me. But I do have to say I've loved every single one that we've done. Um,
mm.
I'm really looking forward to next year, actually, because this is that. I guess this is the point. A bit of this conversation is to say, yeah, it's a roundup, but it's not like we're sitting back thinking, yeah, we've probably done it now. Actually, it's just made us more eager to speak to a range of people, and when we got quite busy in the end, didn't we? We were sort of like having to say, yeah,
Sorry, your episode won't come out for a few months because we've got a backlog. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I've really enjoyed this year's conversations. There's not a single conversation that we've had that I haven't learned something new from.
yeah,
Um,
agree,
I enjoyed not. I know it was a solo series, but I enjoyed trying to go and do a live one from the Regenerative Agriculture
yeah,
Summit and getting to
yeah,
speak to a lot of people and getting a kind of feel for the conference. That was good personally for me.
yeah,
I think the one that potentially I learned most about was probably Rory Peter from the Global Roundtable on Sustainable Beef,
yes,
because honestly, it's just not something I had I'd really thought about.
Yeah.
So it was good to learn something new there. And he was an excellent guest. I thought he really kind of gave us a lot and was quite honest and balanced in his approach to things, which was nice. But I think everyone's been good. You know, the conversations that we have before and after as well sometimes are probably the value that we've got out of it. It's learning what
Yeah.
people really think, because often people are tied to, they're tied to their corporate narratives to some degree when it comes to talking in public. But the conversation before, you kind of get the real picture.
Yeah.
I know that for our listeners, that's not they don't get to hit that bit. But that's been good from my perspective. I also really enjoyed the conversation with ProForest with Neil. I think he just came out, and especially around EUDR, and I think we'll touch on this later. Just in terms of how it could have been better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also I think the other bit is that what has been useful is to get a diverse range of commodities. I mean, I don't know, 60% of my time is based in palm oil. So I kind of have, I have blinkers on a lot of the time thinking about palm oil and oils and fats in general. But actually, then when you start getting involved in subjects such as smallholders and, how does that affect them? And, when you also think of this, like Indonesia, Malaysia, that belt of where everything comes from, Brazil as well, the Amazon, where we've got this wonderful, valuable land. And that's where so many of the rich commodities come from. And how, again, it's the knock-on effect. Because going back to Malaysia, just rubbing it in, 2 weeks Malaysia, is that we were talking about people taking. We're talking about the settlers in Peninsular Malaysia and what would they do when they have to pass on the land and they pass it on to their families. And it was talking about they have to keep it as plantations, and then the discussion about risk. Well, what if you sell it off for building plots because you've got an increasing population? And one of the things that came up was solar panels. That people are removing plantation, putting solar panels in its place. So therefore, actually, that's great for energy, but that's not actually what we want to be doing. When we're still back to, we need palm oil to feed the world, and the massive increase in biodiesel and aviation fuel that's going to come from plant-based and in particular palm oil. So just that kind of stuff was, again, it's just great to piece it all together, isn't it? Everything is holistic. You cannot look at one thing in isolation. You just can't.
And that is one of the biggest challenges, I think. We'll talk in a minute about whether it's been a good year for sustainable commodities, but that's one of the biggest challenges in sustainability that people know about, but they don't really think about. It's the second order impacts, those unintended consequences. Yeah, great. We've got some renewable energy that's on a former plantation, but now where are you going to grow the palm oil? Well, you're going to cut down some more forest. The solar panels on roofs, solar panels in lots of areas are fantastic, but they are not good when it comes to land use. No one's going to be able to tell me that they're good when it comes to land use because they take up a lot.
Well, it's farmland in the UK. I mean, we both in the north of England, and I know there are 2 or 3 big planning arguments going on now about saying this land should be for growing food. It should not, be for solar panel. And why don't we them on buildings, or car park roofs or whatever? What is it that somehow taking land that should be growing wheat and grapeseed or peas or whatever should be put over to solar panels?
Because some of the most productive farmland in the world as well. That's the thing that gets me. Yeah, and I think Rory Peter actually he was talking about this when it came to beef. He was talking about the Irish getting rid of a couple of 100,000 head of cattle. It's where then do they come from that we don't think about? So okay, we've solar paneled over this field in the UK. We still need that wheat. Where does that come from? That comes from somewhere else, which may have to be deforested or converted. It's not a silver bullet, and it's not. I struggle with the sustainability argument for it when there are other alternatives on the green energy front. But I mean, I don't think we're going to solve that today either.
No, I
No,
don't think we are.
no.
The fact that methane increases when a cow gets older, and therefore you slaughter it sooner, and then it doesn't produce so much methane is an interesting topic. So,
I mean, it's systems approach, isn't it? It's one of those other buzzwords that you've got to look at the holistic. And, I talk about this a lot in terms of how cynical I am, but I generally get to a point of, right, what's the least worst thing we can do? Everything has an unintended consequence. Everything has a cost. Everything has a negative. Doesn't matter what you're talking about, whatever you're doing. So find the least worst of those and try not to be too ideological about the approach and look more at the outcomes is probably where I'm at now. So moving on kind of to more broadly, has it been a good year for sustainable commodities or not?
ooh, well, I guess if you think about, and we will talk about EUDR, if you're talking about, say, palm oil, it has really driven the palm oil industry to be incredibly transparent, really driving down deforestation, and really bringing lots of things together to improve the way palm oil is grown. However, I just think it makes me nervous when you see the squabbles around tariffs. You see what's coming out of the United States. Like, actually, the UK government is now starting to shuffle its feet and say, not sure. The UK forest regulations have still not appeared. So I guess it's this thing of some commodities have probably carried on its journey, whereas other things are now backtracking. And does it mean that people start to say, well, it doesn't matter, and climate change? I mean, I'm amused by people who go, there's nothing. No, there isn't climate change. What you're saying about climate change? And it's like, there is climate change. Look at the rain that we're having now. Look at the temperatures we've got now. We see it in a very short space of time. So maybe I think, no, it's not been a brilliant year, perhaps, is what maybe I should say.
Yeah, I think I'm broadly with you. I think there are lots of challenges facing it. I think you've got, apart from, again, I'm not going to mention EUDR significantly here. We'll get into it properly, but legislatively, that hasn't been good. I think generally the political environment hasn't been supportive of it globally. The shift politically towards more isolationist policies, let's say, and more kind of conservative policies in the US, the backlash towards a lot of the net zero stuff in Europe, it all has a knock-on effect. And I think that if you look at the kind of overall climate, it's not been positive. I think that's not to say there haven't been some really good things done. That's not to say that some industries aren't moving forward. I think if you're a smallholder, you probably say it's been a dreadful year. Certainly in an EUDR-based commodity, you probably say it's not a great year. But progress, I think, is not linear. And I think you're always going to have these setbacks. You're going to have, it's not like we can just draw a line on a graph and go, yeah, things are getting better all the time. It's like running a business. You have those points where everything goes back down, as long as the broad trend is going in the right way. And I think that it probably still is. We're looking at things more holistically. Things like regenerative agriculture are being deployed at increasing scale. Traceability, although it's not the be all and end all, I think we'll touch on this some more. It is, there's better traceability than there's ever been before in a lot of commodities.
Yeah.
So there are positives. Whether this continues, I think that you're right in saying that, governments are wobbling on a lot of this stuff. And I think the economic climate is probably to blame for that. It's very easy to do the right thing when you've got plenty of cash rolling about. When employment's high, when living standards are high in Europe, then yeah, it's make hay while the sun shines, isn't it? People are very happy to pay a bit more for this. And finance is a big issue that I think is going to be an increasing theme, is access to that finance. But when things are going badly, and I think we'd all agree that economically, certainly in the UK and Europe, things aren't going particularly well, then it becomes a luxury belief, doesn't it? It becomes something that people see as an inconvenience, that people see as a drag on their living standards. They see as a compromise, and they also start putting it under more and more scrutiny. So all the things that don't work tar the whole of the rest of the industry with the same brush. I don't have a solution for that, but I think that's where we're at. If I was grading it on a kind of A to E, I'd say this year's probably been a D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just one kind of quite emotional, passionate please. A lot of people always talk about the young and the future of it. And I'm always thinking, well, no, we're here today. This is what we should be doing. But I was actually shocked when I've been talking to young people about how depressed they are and about where does this future take me. And I think we have a moral responsibility, even to all generations, to actually try to find the good and promote the good, because otherwise it's a bloody miserable existence at the minute of this constant doom. So it's just that's a strong thought of this year for me, I guess, about the doom and gloom.
Yeah, I think a lot of that doom and gloom, some of it's climate related, but I think a lot more of it now is economically related. You know, the youth unemployment, AI and businesses not taking on young people. You know, in the UK, we've got 1 million people from, is it 16 to 24 or 18 to 24, who have they're not in education, they're not in employment.
Yeah.
That's dangerous. Societies that don't provide opportunities for the young, the social contract's been broken, essentially. They don't have the opportunities that we had.
Yeah.
And that's a really dangerous time. They can't buy a house, they can't even get a job. What are you going to have other than nihilism in that case?
Yeah.
And despondency.
Yeah.
And then when you're thinking about the climate stuff, and it's like, well, and also your planet might be uninhabitable in 100 years.
Yes.
It's not a great future. We're not painting that. We lack a shared, unified vision for a positive future. And yeah, that's something that we all need to try and change.
Yeah.
Moving on to some of the more positive themes, though, I guess. Like, I don't want this to be doom and gloom, because it hasn't all been doom and gloom.
No, it hasn't.
You know, the regenerative agriculture stuff, I think, it is a real opportunity and a positive. You've got with the political climate, it's not poisoned politically or divisive politically in the same way that carbon is. It's an opportunity that you can sell across the political spectrum. And I think that's something, and it solves a lot of, or it works towards solving a lot of the other challenges. So I think that the rise in that has been a real positive this year.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it has become a focus. It's a focus of my work where it wasn't in 2024.
And yeah, same.
So
Same. I mean, I heard of it, but
yeah,
it wasn't. I wasn't hearing it at conferences to the same degree. I wasn't hearing it from my clients in terms of what they were looking to do to the same degree. So there's a definite appetite for it, and long may it continue.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I do think that's a really positive, and lots of exciting things. Like Rainforest Alliance, really focused on regenerative agriculture at the back end of this year. So yeah, there has been some really positive stories. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the kind of potential client projects I've got for next year are with people in regenerative agriculture, because that's clearly where the kind of momentum is. I think we've discussed the negatives, but let's move on to the main event and a very key theme on this podcast, the EUDR.
Yes.
Should we start by right? It's currently the 9th of December. 2025. Judith, tell me where we're at with EUDR, in the EUDR saga right now.
So next week commencing the 15th, there will be a vote, which is everybody expects. no reason to say it won't. It will now be delayed from December 2025 to December 26. And it's followed concerns from member states and stakeholders about the readiness of companies and administrations, as well as technical issues. So I'm just looking at a EU press release that was released on the 4th of December, and it seems to be blaming the fact that industry perhaps is not ready. But the one thing that isn't ready is the IT platform and its complexity. So it's saying that there's going to be a targeted simplification of the due diligence process. Interestingly enough, it doesn't talk about the polygon data, which I assume is all still going to go ahead. But what is happening is that it will be the operator, the first business company person who places product on the market will still have to put in that due diligence statement. Then after that, the obligation goes, people can just quote the number, which when this was all first announced, the impact and the scale of it, I was just thinking, why on earth would you do that? Why would you just not do the first operator? So to me, this is a really more logical outcome. But I think, and I will finish in a second. I think the bit for me is Europe has decided it's not ready for a variety of different reasons. It's too complicated. They're going to take things like books and paper, I think, out of the, they're going to simplify it. So books and newspaper and printed pictures will come out of the regulation. Why would you have put that in the first place and make it so complicated? But the rest, I've heard people seen it in Malaysia, obviously seen it at the RSPO conference. People are ready and invested millions in getting the palm oil industry ready. Other industries not so ready, but so much has been done. People have walked away from smallholder business to be ready. And now the EU is calling it with 3 weeks to go, basically?
Yeah. I mean, they're getting, in terms of the latest developments, in terms of simplification, back to potentially what it should have been at the start. You think in terms of the mechanism of having due diligence just at the start, isn't that what certification offers?
Yes. And the blind, we're not going to recognize any certification. And then, like Dutch Competent Authority have recognized RSPO. I think they've even recognized MSPO, which is the Malaysian Palm Oil Standard, which if they've done it in the first place, these standards are good. Has anybody bothered to go and look at them in detail and say, yeah, actually, we like that. If you don't like that, is there any way that you could develop this and do this, this, and this with it? It's a base to go to, and
one that could have been
incredible.
implemented.
Yeah,
we'd have it if they'd have, and it sounds like we're doing a Captain Hindsight, but we're not, because
no,
these things were talked about from the very beginning as issues.
yeah,
You talk about people like Proforest, you talk about businesses. These are the very objections that they raised from the start.
yeah.
And if they'd have just listened instead of tried to impose, we could have had a working system that actually might have had an impact on deforestation. I think the biggest issue is that they have focused. This is supposed to be about stopping deforestation, but actually, if you look at it, it's not. It's about stopping products that are from deforested areas from reaching the EU market.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where the big focus on traceability, everything must be fully traceable. So we can say we're not doing it. That's not solving a global problem. That's washing your own, your own supply chain while, they've talked about leading the way and encouraging others. That's not what's happened. I think to steelman EUDR, before I try and tear it apart, the intent in terms of making sure that products aren't from deforested areas is obviously a good one. I don't think anyone has ever said to us, "Oh no, that's not a good idea." But the implementation has been dreadful from the start, confusing, dreadful comms, and also it's a failure on its own core intent.
Yeah.
I don't believe it's going to make a difference to deforestation. I
No.
think that the impacts of it are it's going to cut smallholders out of supply chains, and it's going to add costs for businesses, which is going to add costs for consumers. And that's about all it's achieved. And you look at those costs, they're in the billions. It's rewarded companies that haven't done anything by delaying it twice.
Yeah.
We've all, both me and you are kind of in the sort of beneficiaries of EUDR, if anything, because our work has been to help companies to plan for and to communicate about what they're doing and to help communicate with customers. For us, it's a gift that's kept on giving, but that's not where it should have been. That's not where the reward should have been. Has a single farmer benefited from this?
No, I don't know, because I also think that the confusion about what is a forest. I mean, the sheer fact the definition of a forest is different. It's not completely different. It's different to RSPO or to other things has made it more complicated. And the fact that they have left so many smallholders out because they don't have access to adequate internet to be able to coordinate some of these things. So people walk away from them because it is a risk. I think one of the things to highlight as well is that cocoa and coffee, I think cocoa in particular, something like 60% of the cocoa crop goes through Europe. So it is significant. And obviously coffee, I think, is a big number too. But what is interesting about palm oil is shrinking because Europe has decided not to use palm oil in biodiesel.
Yeah.
So now it's dropped to, I don't know, something like 4 million tons. And what we're looking at is it's going to be like 5% of the total palm oil production. So the impact on the rest of the world, Europe is very small and has no impact. So countries like India and China, who are the second and third largest buyers and consumers of palm oil, don't have these standards, and we have no impact on it. And interestingly, Indonesia is the biggest user and the biggest consumer. So unless you can give great influence, this is where the world will lose out. I suppose just so that we don't get too outraged, because I can sense we're both getting wow. Is if you think of the positive that so many businesses have prepared, and one of the things that is a big point is a due diligence process. So the challenge, if you take all the IT stuff away and just say, if you got a due diligence process where you can identify deforestation and also social risks and the conversation around smallholders, perhaps that should be something that we think that this could be a benefit, because I do worry that come 2026, some commodities could easily go, do you know what, we're really not bothered about Europe. So actually, we'll be shipping in what we think we're going to ship in. And if you don't like it, fine us, because actually we're not that bothered about it because the market is so small. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to ship in that commodity. We'll just ship in something that's outside of Annex 1 that's finished and produced somewhere else. And oleochemicals is massive. Could be easily made in China and India, toothpaste, etc., shampoo, soap, be made elsewhere, and it's Europe that will lose. And nobody thought about that. But on a positive note, what could we take away from it is perhaps the message we should
and I think there are positives. I think on the tech side, it's driven through a lot of the traceability monitoring. A lot of these businesses wouldn't have had the market to sell their traceability services to, and that has helped develop them. We're now better than ever and more capable than ever of tracing deforestation, monitoring it, seeing where it's come from. It's also got a lot of companies thinking about their wider NDP policies. So whether or not EUDR comes in, a lot of them have prepared. I know that my clients have said, well, you know what, even if it gets cancelled, we've now got, essentially, we're going to be following basically those rules.
Yes.
So that's a positive. So I am very negative on EUDR, but there's a silver lining to everything. And I think that should be applauded. I guess the issue with that as well is that we focus so much on traceability that we've forgotten about the impact in terms of what we were trying to do in the first place. Because what we're now trying to do is just comply. We're creating data for compliance. We're not, and all that money that's been focused on traceability and compliance and paperwork and due diligence and comms and everything else could have been spent on some projects that actually had an impact on the ground, or on buying some smallholder credits or some supporting markets at the source that could have actually had some measurable impact. So that's the downside with that. But there are some positives to it. I think that's fair. Where do you think it ends? They've got in April, they're talking about reviewing the impact of EUDR. I mean, if they review the impact of EUDR, they're going to find some things they don't want to, or maybe they do want to hear. They're going to find out that the impact that they planned was not there.
I think they will simplify the supply chain that has to do the reporting. So I think they'll get rid of all of, that's the implication. I think that it'll just be operators who place anything on the market. I wonder whether or not that anything that the EU exports will be also dropped, because actually, if you're exporting out of the EU, you have to produce all of this information. So if it was, say, going into the UK, so I wonder if that will get dropped. So there will be limited information, and I know, and obviously the annexes, Annex 1, particularly on timber, will be reduced. I don't think you can reduce palm oil, but again, the list is weird because it names a range of oleochemicals, but it's not the full list. And some things are in and some things are out, and maybe that should be something that's dropped, because again, it has major impacts on industry in Europe, particularly those that are manufacturing home and personal care. So where does it go? I think it's lost credibility. I think Europe has lost credibility. I think it just shows that it's chaotic. It's the only time that I've carried on the joke of I wasn't for Brexit, but actually I suppose this is a good thing because I'm not tainted because I live in the UK.
Same.
So I just think a massive loss of credibility, and I think businesses will continue their progress, and it'll be businesses that are doing the right thing because they see it's the right thing to do. But do you know what? I could almost see it not happening. That's how I feel about it now.
I genuinely think it won't happen now. I think even with all the sunk costs, 2 delays and then the review, I think the review in April is going to be potentially the nail in the coffin for EUDR. That's my bold prediction for 2026 is that
we'll do a podcast in April. Woo,
as soon as, and you can hold me to that. You can say, no, you were wrong. I remember 2 years ago, and sorry to bring up, I think it was our first episode when we talked to Ruben. And he hoped, he was much more positive on it. And he said, I hope it comes in full and on time. And I said, delayed and diluted. Now I think delayed, diluted, then cancelled. And it'll be a sad end. You mentioned about the kind of the damage to Europe's reputation. You could almost, I struggle not to hear like Farage's voice in my head when it's like, it's a bureaucratic mess. It's they're just messing about, telling people what to do. And, it's like, in this case, it's true, isn't it? That's the real issue, is it's true. They have made a massive mistake throughout the entire process, and it's a mess, and everyone in Europe is paying for it.
Yeah.
But
And
anyway,
I also, it's one of those things that is that people were making decisions when they hadn't actually. And again, these are stories that I heard out whilst traveling this year. People making decisions when they'd never seen a plantation, or they never understood what a smallholder did, or they didn't understand dealers. I mean, this is specific to palm oil here. Didn't understand dealers. So really the call here is that anyone that makes legislation needs to be an expert in their field. And I suppose it's a call out, to people listening, is we've got some great contacts in the field, opportunities to go and visit different plantations and different things. And that is, if you're trying to work out what your business should do, getting your team, your staff knowledgeable about what's happening on the ground so they can make quite clearly informed, educated decisions is crucial. And maybe that's what we've learned from this. And I hope the UK government won't make the same mistake, because the UK forest regulations haven't happened, but they haven't gone away. Is that something that's going to appear in 2026? And again, deforestation and how that's recorded in due diligence is something that could become law in 2026. So that would be for the UK only. But again, making sure that people understand the commodities that they are legislating for.
I mean, you've just said, yeah, it's a bit like I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. We send all of the bureaucrats to the jungle.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's probably not a bad plan. Whether we bring them back or not might be another discussion. Right, we'll move on from EUDR. It will roll into next year. We'll undoubtedly talk about it again. But yeah, if we're grading that on an A to E, it's an E.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
If it passes at all, it might even be a U. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Unclassified.
Yes.
Yeah. So to the future, we mentioned a little bit about what we're kind of going to be talking about on the podcast. I'm really positive about continuing this and having more conversations. We've got to a point now where people come to us and want to talk to us about things, which is always where we want it to be. It's opened up so many conversations, and next year we've already got a few planned in for January. So coming up, we're going to be talking to someone in sugar. We're going to be talking to one of the world's biggest producers of palm as well.
Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. And we've also potentially got some other certification schemes coming on as well from your trip.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, what would you like us to be talking about over the next year?
Yeah. Okay. I guess for me, obviously, if anybody that's listening has got any ideas, I just think it's very much about what's happening in the market, looking at a range of commodities as we have been doing, and trying to seek out the things that are really interesting and could give you a direction of travel, and things that you don't hear in mainstream media. And we big on regenerative agriculture. Yes, we'll keep an eye on legislation, but I do think it's more about what should you do? What should your business do? What are the ideas that we could bring in this podcast and discuss to drive due diligence, just drive a better place to live, and things like smallholders and things like RSPO smallholder credits for independent smallholders. People aren't buying them. These are things that can be really life changing. So it's just little things like that maybe that we should start to get involved in.
I agree. I want to hear about solutions.
Yeah.
I want to discuss less about the EUDR. I think that this cathartic outburst today will probably be it won't be my last, but I don't want to be having this conversation next year about EUDR. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I don't want to write another policy. I don't want to. I will be again, but I don't want to. I want to be writing about progress, and I want to be hearing about progress on this podcast. I want to be hearing about the solutions that are happening. I want to be hearing about methods that people can do. I want technical solutions. there's someone who I would like to speak to in the regenerative agriculture space who I've been speaking to. I want to speak about their product. They've got soil treatment out there that's, that its results certainly in I think it's in West Africa have been really astounding. I want to hear. I want to hear about this, and I want to share it with our audience so that they can take those ideas and implement them, and we can all have more of an impact in the direction we want to.
Yeah, no, definitely. That sounds like a great plan.
Great. Well, I think that's probably a nice place to end it. Thank you very much to everyone who's listened to any episodes this year. Please, if you want to come on the podcast, if you've got a nice solution, something to say, then just get in touch. We will see you in 2026 for more episodes of the Sustainable Commodities Podcast.
The new year.